right, welcome everybody to week 1, July session for building chords. I'm really glad you guys are here. Knowing how to build scales and chords is the first step in understanding music theory, which is not as scary as it sounds, because music theory actually equals emotions. So we already know how we feel when we hear something. We already know if we like it, if we don't like it. We already know what kind of emotions it evokes within us. So now all we're doing is putting some terminology to those concepts. Music is comprised of a 12-note scale called a chromatic scale. Now, before I continue, I want you to all play your chromatic scale on the A string. So that would be every single fret. So A, then fret 1 happens to be called B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. Now if we're looking at the scale down here with the ukes, we're here on fret 8, that's an F. F sharp is fret 9, G is fret 10, G sharp is fret 11, and then our scale starts over again at A, and that happens at fret 12. That's called an octave. It's called an octave. So if we play every single note in a row, that's called a chromatic scale. We're learning our ABCs. I mean, this is the very beginning of learning what music is to understand that there are only 12 notes. And when we play them in sequence, one right after the other, that's called a chromatic scale. So there's only the one chromatic scale. It can start anywhere, it can end anywhere. So when you say chromatic scale, you're just talking about every single note. In Perry's classes, you might have heard him talk about the chromatic approach notes, or something like that, or a chromatic run when you're doing soloing and blues and stuff. What that simply means is one note right after the next. Chromatic, okay? One right after the other. It literally means of all colors or of all tones, which is pretty interesting because colors and music, like visual art and auditory art, have a lot of terms in common with each other. There are only 12 notes, and when we combine those notes in various ways, we organize music into a pleasant sound. So right now, it's not a very pleasant sound. I mean, it's not, we wouldn't say that that's necessarily musical. We need to combine the notes now into some very specific ways so that we can create music. Right now we're just making sound. But what I do want to point out before we continue is every single string on your ukulele instrument is a chromatic scale. So just do me a favor, play the E string open and then play all the way up. And if you're able to, kind of acknowledge what note you're playing just by looking here on this diagram. And when you get to 12, it will sound the same as your open string. So we are all in agreement that fret 12 is the same note as our open strings. All right, I'm going to keep reading. Piano is a great way to look at these notes because all of them are represented in a nice clean row. And they start on C. That's just arbitrary. It's just common for people to talk in the key of C, because when we do organize these notes into a scale, the C scale is the only scale that has only white keys on the keyboard. So that's why people usually talk about things in terms of the key of C, because it's less complicated that way. Ukulele strings are designed just like a piano. except instead of black and white keys, we have fret marks that separate each note. So do you all understand that concept? This little piano keyboard is the very same as the A string and the E string and the C string and the G string. It's kind of like we have 4 little pianos side by side on our instrument. So learning a little bit about music theory on a stringed instrument can be a little bit more complicated because you don't just have one nice linear set of notes. Now we've got them on 4 strings and they each start at a different note, so they're kind of staggered in a special way. In order to build chords, we must first organize these sounds by building some scales. Because there are only 12 notes in Western music, this means there are only 12 major scales, because we're going to start on each note and build a scale from there. In order to build a scale, we must begin on a note, which we'll call the root, and then take a series of whole steps and half steps. A whole step is when you skip a fret and land on the next one, or I think of it as a leapfrog. So everybody do me a favor, play your D note, which is fret 2 of the C string. Here on there. We're going to take a whole step forward along the string. So we're going to skip a fret and we're going to land on the next fret, which means you would land on the 4th fret, which is E. So you just took a whole step. You did a little leapfrog over a fret and you landed on the next fret. A half step is when you move to the very next note or fret. I think of that as a baby step. So go back to your D note and take a half a step forward. You should have went to the very next fret. Okay, so let me test you one more time because I just want to make sure you understand this basic concept before we continue. I want you to go up here to the C note, just like a C chord, on the A string, 3rd fret, A string. Okay, take a whole step forward. You should be on fret 5 now. We all in agreement? Okay, go back to your C note. Now take a half a step forward. Now we're on C sharp, fret 4, right? Okay, so a whole step and a half step are actually intervals, but instead of calling them minor second and major second, which is what they are, we're going to call them a whole step and a half step. Blah, blah, blah. This way we will create an organized series of notes, or a scale, that sounds like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Because right now what we have on our chromatic scale is but what we want to create is, so we're going to take out 5 of those notes and just be left with 7 of them, which all sound very harmonious to the human ear in terms of Western music. I won't bring up Western music anymore after this, but you know, someone in China, they have different, they use notes in between our notes. They're called semitones. People in the Arabic cultures, you know, cultures that don't have frets, but they have just strings, they can get in between these notes, and they have names for those notes. We don't even go there in our world. We only have the 12, thank God, because 12 is a number we understand. There's 12 months in the year. There's 12 hours in the day. 12 dozen, there's a dozen eggs, you know. On the next page, let's use a whole, half, whole, half system to build our 12 major scales. From these scales, we will build our chords. Now, this paper is very handy. I have some students who, once they filled this out correctly, they put it up on the wall. And so now whenever we have our private lessons, they'll look up on the wall and they'll say, oh yeah, the 1, the 3, and the 5 of that key are these 3 notes. So you're going to want to keep this paper as a reference paper for always. You've got your little keyboard at the bottom. Now let me just walk you through some things, and then you're going to fill these out. Make sure you use a pencil just in case you make a mistake, okay? or have some, you know, whiteout handy. So at the top of the page, you'll see do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And then going vertically down, you're going to see all 12 notes. I did not put them in alphabetical order on purpose. Okay? The way these are, the relationship of these notes, these scales are the way you see it around the circle of fifths, which is basically just a beautiful compass that's there to help us find all of our answers. But let me tell you this thing. There are sharp keys and there are flat keys. Don't spend too much time wondering why. Every scale is alphabetical. And that's one of the reasons why we call something a sharp sometimes, and sometimes we call it a flat. Your only job is to remember that, you know, a C, well, the C scale, it has no sharp or flat. That's the only scale like that. But the G scale has one sharp in it, so we call that a sharp scale. The key signature determines how many sharps, or tells us how many sharps or flats there are. The nature of the word signature is it's the only one. So the key of G is the only key that has one sharp. Okay? Let me put that a different way. It's the only major key that has one sharp. All right. The D has two sharps. The A scale has three sharps in it. So that's kind of like a little a hint for you to check your work, okay? So the way you're going to build your scale is, let's start together on C. You got your little piano down here. So C is number 1. We've already written it in. We call that the root. And we're going to follow these instructions. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So from the C, we're going to take a whole step forward. We'll land on a D note, and then we'll put the D there under re. So we've already done one whole step. Then we have another whole step to do. So we'll go from a D, whole step, to E. That's whole step. We're skipping the black note, going to the white note. So we would put an E, and that's the third note of our C scale. After that, we take a half a step. So from the E, half a step forward is the F. And you might have noticed there's no black key in between the E and the F. And there's no black key between the B and the C. Those are the two spots in our chromatic scale that do not have a sharp in between. You're going to want to remember that any way you want. I used to teach the kids the phrase, because elephant fuzz. B, C, E, F. Doesn't make any sense, but it's stuck in their memory somehow. I'd say why, and they'd say because elephant fuzz. So I'm gonna let you start filling in your scales, and I'm gonna open the floor for questions. If you're confused on what to do here, I have no problem explaining it to you again, because everybody else is busy doing their work there. And you will just slowly memorize these scales, guys. If you're anything like me, I didn't just sit down one day and go, oh, bop, 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 it's uploaded. I had to like rewrite these scales over and over as I needed them. And eventually I would go, well, I think that D has two sharps, but let me make sure. And then I would write it all out, and then I'd go, oh, it does. And then after a while, I trusted myself enough to know. The scales that you're going to want to memorize, I'm going to put a little star by them. I'm going to make my star yellow. Scales you're going to want to know for sure are the first, let's see, probably about 5 of them here. So you're going to want to know the C, the G, the D, and the A. If you play with guitar players, you're going to want to know E, but we won't include that for now. And you're going to want to know the F And you might want to know your B flat scale, but of course you're kind of getting into some more sophisticated songs, but a lot of jazz songs are B flat. So these are really the scales you're going to want to focus on. Scales to memorize first. So let me show you a little trick about how you can come up with some of the other ones. Look at the F scale at the very bottom. You'll notice that all of the notes are natural except for the B, right? It's a B flat. Then look at the F sharp scale right in the center. You'll notice there that all of the notes are sharp except for the B. That's because the relationship between the notes remains the same, the whole steps and the half steps. So if you need to quickly remember what's in your F sharp scale, later down the road you can go to yourself and say, well, I know what's in an F scale, and I know that everything in the F sharp scale is just going to be a half a step higher. So that may or may not make it more confusing or easier. If it's more confusing, just ignore what I just said. Okay, does everybody have a paper that matches mine? Okay, so far you've learned some incredibly important things that are fundamental. 1, a chromatic scale is simply every single note in a row. 2, there are only 12 notes total in all of Western music. Every song that's been written since the 1500s was using only 12 notes. And actually a lot of the music in the 1500s didn't even use all 12. They had these ideas that there's something called the devil's triad and stuff that you weren't allowed to use. Okay, so now what we want to do is take one of those scales and look at it individually. C major scale. Now let's build the first 2 basic chords. Now, let me stop sharing just for a moment because I want you to listen to the sounds. Without worrying about playing it yourself, I just want you to listen. There's all kinds of chords because there's all kinds of ways of combining these notes, right? But luckily, like the name of the chord usually tells you what the ingredients in the chord are. So each chord has more than one note, right? A chord has to have at least more than one. You can have a 2-note chord. We call that a dyad, just 2 notes. You can have a 3-note chord, which is called a triad, okay? There's only 3 different kinds of triads. Technically, there's only 3 different kinds of triads. One of them is a C major, so I'd play it like this. You guys are used to playing it like that. But if I play the 3 notes in a row that comprise a C major, which we'll do in this class, I'm going to be going. So if you'd like to play that with me, actually, you can do 5, 4, 3. I'm not playing the A string at all. C, E, G. And when we combine them together, we hear just one tone. C. Playing my C chord, even though the highest pitch is the G, right? If we add that C on the very top, which gives us the shape like this, 5, 4, 3, 3, then we end with that C note on top, C, and you can hear how all of those notes combined actually harmonize together to create one note, one tone. But it's kind of a fat tone, right? It's not just the C note anymore. Now it's a C note with 2 harmony notes backing it up that create what we call a C major triad. So that's a very happy sound. If I'm writing a song about happy, I'm gonna use the C chord or some kind of major triad. Now, I can take one of those notes. Let's go back to just the 3 fingers. 5, 4, 3, C major. If I take one note, the one in the middle, and I pull it backward by 1 fret, half a step, if I go a half a step down, that's what we call flattening it. We're going to flatten that note. We're going to take it a half a step down, and we'll rearrange our fingers so it's a little bit easier. And now we've got 5, 3, 3 instead of 5, 4, 3, okay? So 5-3-3, totally different sound. In certain contexts, it can be kind of happy and poetic, but when you do it side by side, it sounds devastating, doesn't it? So I think of this as the shadow. So if you put that E back, we get the sunshine. And if we want to make that chord, major triad, into a minor triad, we only move the one note backward by 1/2 a step. And we're going to talk about which note that is that we move. But right now, I just want you to hear it. Okay? So major triad, minor triad. Now that's having the notes in the correct order. That's what we call root position, or in piano, you guys who play piano, you would have remembered root position, and then you start doing inversions on piano. That's where you take the bottom note and you put it on top. So you're still playing the same 3 notes, but you're not starting on the same one. You're starting on a different one from the triad. With our instruments, it's a little bit different because, like we talked about, there's 4 pianos here. So we don't have 2 hands on one long line of notes. Now we've got 1 hand spanning 4 different possibilities here. So our shapes look a little bit different, but it still sounds the same. So do me a favor, let's play an A major. Do you know your A major chord? 2-1, open, open. That's A major. And then everybody in this class knows your A minor, right? We take that note and we move it back 1/2 a step, which means we just let go. Now, we have an A minor triad. A major, A minor. And we're going to look at what notes are in these chords, but right now we're doing ear training. Major, minor, okay? I could do it with a couple other ones. I got G major. You guys all know your G major. Well, now it's the one at the very top we have to move down 1/2 a step. So instead of a B, we want a B flat. So we have to rearrange our fingers a little bit to get our fingers in the right spot. And now we've got that note on top is the one that moved. First it was up here. Now it's down here. G major, G minor. So are we all in agreement that it's only one note that's moved backward by 1/2 a step that makes that humongous change from a major triad to a minor triad? One little tiny note moved back 1/2 a step changes the whole sound, the whole feel of our chord. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to sharing. We're going to look at this paper that I have up here for us. I'm going to stop sharing and share my whole screen because I want to make sure we got it all. Nope. Sorry, folks. The one with me on it. That's what I need. Okay. Okay, so here's where we get into the mathematics of music. And I hope that doesn't scare you away. If you weren't so good at math growing up, I wasn't either. Somehow I got put in the smart math class, but to be honest, it's only because I was cheating off of Michael Velasquez in 7th grade. And from then on out, in 8th grade, they threw me in algebra, and then I went higher and higher after that. Plus, I really wanted to get my A's because my dad gave me $50 every time I got an A. Right? $50 for an A average, right? So I really worked hard to earn it, but I didn't really understand the math very much. However, musical math is emotional. So I understand emotions very well. So I can emotionally connect to this kind of math. So I'm going to give you some formulas I want you to memorize. And the first formula is, in order to form a major triad, you need the first, the third, and the fifth notes from a scale. So if we're going to form a C major, then we go to our C major scale, and we pull out the 1, the 3, and the 5. And when we combine those 3 notes together, now we have a C major chord, or a C major triad. I gave you 3 different examples of how to play a C major triad on the ukulele. These are by no means the only examples. There's plenty more as far as your imagination and your fingers can stretch, because these notes can be found all over the instrument. So you can create C major triads all over the instrument. I'll even reference this from our last class, monkey chords. So this is perfect because this is where all of the notes are, not the black dots. Black dots were representing where to place your finger, but not, those notes aren't being heard. So don't look at the black dots. But if you take a look at this, we've got a C, an E, and a G. And this is where all of the C, E's, and G's are on the ukulele, all the way up to fret 12. So take a look at that and I'll answer Robin's question.
Does it matter as long as you have the 3, which one is doubled?
Does not matter. That's a great question. And so you might have noticed that they're doubled. Why? Can somebody tell me why would an example like this, why would we have one of the notes doubled up?
More sound, more variety.
You get more variety. Yeah, that's true. Also because our instrument has 4 strings, but we only need to play 3 notes. So instead of not playing one of the strings, we just play one of the notes on that string as well. So you can certainly double up. In the examples you see here, there's 2 C's. There's an open C string and there's a high C. Here there's 2 G's in the fingering that we've used. Here there's also 2 G's, way up here on fret 7. So in the monkey chord class, we just talked about how to connect every possibility of C that covers all 4 strings. But you can play all kinds of C's. You can even play open G, open C, open E, and then press on fret 7. What would that sound like? Fret 7 of the A string. That's a C chord. I know because it's only got the 3 notes from my C major triad in it. I just happen to have the E on the very top. So that's pretty interesting. I can also press on fret 10 with my 3 open strings and fret 10. That's an interesting way to play a C chord. Kind of sounds like I'm in the Appalachian Mountains now, right? I got the guitar and the mandolin playing at the same time. All right. The other example on this page to the right is the G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, which you'll slowly remember that the G scale has 1 sharp in it and it's an F. And so when we take our 1, our 3, and our 5 from the G major scale, we can form them in these shapes on our ukulele fretboard, and we've got all these different ways to play a G scale. And let me see. Oh yeah, I do have that here. It's just below. So here's the same thing where all of the notes from our G major triad are represented on this shape to the left. All you see is a G, a B, or a D, right? So when you're doing chord melody solo and your melody starts going up the neck, up on the A string, which happens a lot in the key of C, and your melody is way up on fret 7, but your chord is supposed to be a G chord, then what you can do is you can play parts of your G chord all the way up near fret 7. And that's how people create chord melody solos that go up the neck. They understand that the first position G is by no means the only way to play a G. It just happens to be the easiest way, and that way you have an open string. But you can play a G chord all the way up the fretboard. But this class is all about how to build your own. I want you to make sure that you know you can just grab a scale, build out a chord, knowing that it's a 1, 3, 5, and then go and locate those notes on the neck, and you can solve your own problems when you're doing chord melody soloing. Or if you're tired of playing what we call cowboy chords, the open position chords, some of you are somewhat new, so you haven't gotten fatigued yet on open position chords. But after a few years, you keep hearing the same inversions, or the same voicings is what we call it. Each one of these is a different voicing. You can hear it. Like I'll play the C chord, and then I'll play this C chord. That's a different voicing. And then if I play it way up here on fret 7, even with an open G, that's a different voicing too. That's pretty interesting. So you get to add a little vocabulary to your chord dialogue by learning that you can play these different shapes up the neck. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a minor triad. So today we're just talking about a major triad and a minor triad. The minor triad, which I've put here on the page in the middle, I put sad. That's just the typical interpretation of a minor chord. Like I said, in different contexts, it doesn't sound sad at all. It sounds poetic. It sounds gentle or compassionate. But all by itself, a minor chord usually sounds pretty devastating. Sounds sad. So, to form a minor triad, you begin with the same major scale. But the formula is a little bit different. 1, flat 3, 5. So you remember when we changed from a major to a minor on our instrument, all we did was take one note and we took it backward by a half a step. That's called flattening the note. We flattened it. The note that you're going to flatten is the third note of your scale. So in the example of C, you're going to have to rearrange your fingers a little bit. So let's look at G instead. In the G scale, a major triad is 1, 3, 5, G, B, D, which is represented here with your open position cowboy chord. Well, if you make a minor G minor, you're going to take that 3, which was a B, and you're going to flatten it. Now you have a B flat. And in the diagram, you can see that that B, which is on the A string, goes backward by a half a step and becomes a B flat. And now you have a new shape. But you'll notice also you can play a G minor up here on fret 5. A lot of people don't know that. It looks a lot like an E minor, doesn't it? That is a really beautiful way to play a G minor chord. And for chord melody solo, it's going to come up. You can also cover up that G string and create a movable shape, which means you're covering all 4 strings, by putting a D at the very bottom instead of a G. So you double up on that D.
Hey, Dani, I have a question.
Yeah.
So the G that we play in cowboy mode, that's not the root chord, right?
Root position? No.
Position. I was trying to change the mid flat, the middle.
Yeah, no.
Used.
In this case, you got to figure out which is the third and where is it located in your shape, because it's an inverted shape now.
Okay.
So what Sandy's talking about is we're not going in order G, B, D, and then taking that center note. In the cowboy version of the chord, the B is at the very top, the D is on the bottom, and the G is in the middle and on the bottom. So piano players come in here, and I know you play piano, Sandy. You probably come in here and go, now wait a second, this isn't a true G major chord. This is it's not even a, what is it? I guess it would be considered a second inversion. You've moved both of these notes forward, and you have that one at the bottom, and this and that and the other. In ukulele terms, we don't really we don't really worry about that too much. I mean, some people might, some teachers might. For the most part, if we just get our fingers on the right fret, we're happy. We're making a good sound. But the way the tuning is on the instrument, it really makes it kind of difficult to play first, or what we call root position. Although, let me see, let me scroll ahead. I think that I did. Okay. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit and show you. This is exactly why in my inversions class, inversions, I did it, it's in the Academy archive. And all of you are in the Academy now, so you have access to the Academy archive page. I've got a class called Harmony. And it talks, this is from that, it talks about intervals. Hold on one sec. Okay, so if we are going to play all of the notes, all of the chords in the first inversion, then we have to start traveling up the neck, is what happens. Now what you're seeing here, we're taking a step forward. Let me scroll back a minute. Oh, okay. Before I go there, I will, but just a minute, because now we're going to make it a little more complex. Does everybody understand how we formed a major triad and a minor triad from whatever scale we chose? I chose these two scales because the chords are easy on the uk, we play them a lot, and the C major scale has no sharps or flats, and the G major scale only has one sharp, so we're not really having to talk about sharps and flats too much. Alright, so who would like to volunteer and tell me what their F major scale is? Robin, lay it on me.
F major would be F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F.
Okay, is everybody in agreement that that is an F major scale? Perfect. F major scale has one flat. It's the only major scale that has only a single flat. And the flat is B. So you want to lock that in your memory bank. Okay, what's the first note from our F major scale?
F.
F. Third note from the scale? A. Fifth note from our scale? C. F, A, C. That is how you build an F major triad. So if I'm going to build one of those over here, let's see. We already know our F. We can even just fill in. Okay, I know how to play an F. Let me fill it in, but then let's go look at what the notes are. We're going to take this over here. We're going to say, okay, this is an A note. You'll also be learning your notes around the neck, which is pretty nice. All right, this note is an open C. We know because we know our tuning. This note here is an F note, which is a half a step higher than the open E. And then we double up on our A at the end. So that is why you play an F major like that. Now, you might have also seen them in a charts that an F major is played like that. How many of you seen this in a chart before? Okay, the more you go along and find different things, you'll find that. But what note is that I just added on? It's a C note. Is that one of the notes from our major triad? Yeah. So this is an F chord, and this is an F chord. They're both F triads. They just call different voicings. Okay, so then we're going to take that F major chord and we're going to create an F minor chord. So we know that it has an F and we know that it has a C. Those are the same. The 1 and the 5 remain the same. They're like the pillars. They're kind of like the non-emotional pillars of the chord. The 1, 5. You ever hear people play bass and they go boom, 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 boom? Oh, let's see if I'm doing it right. Boom, 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 boom. They just play the 1 and the 5. It's just like the very simple. So, but we need to do something to that A. Does anybody know what we're going to replace the A with in order to create a minor? We're going to take it down a half a step. That's right. So we're going to flatten it. So it goes from an A and it becomes an A flat. Now, as far as the F minor chord goes, it's not as simple as just flattening an A, because look what happens. Our A string is open. Can't just flatten that, baby, because it's open. We're not going to tune it down. So we're going to rearrange a few fingers. We're going to keep our F where it's at. We're going to take this A and we're going to flatten it. So that will go up to fret 1. And then we're going to go and grab that C once again, the one that would have been here if we wanted it to be. We're just going to put that C on the top. So now we've got A flat. Actually, I don't even need that. We only have the one A flat now. Now we've got an F still, like we had before. And now we've got two C's. So now we're playing an F minor chord. Okay, let me see your fingers in the air. How many sharps does the A scale have in it? How many sharps are in the A scale? Count them up. All right, 3. We've got 3 sharps, F, C, and G. So we're going to go A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. So we're right here at the end of our time. So I'm going to build this for you. We've got the A major triad. We're going to do the A, the C sharp, and the E. And when we create our A minor, same thing, except we're going to take the sharp off because we're going to flatten that note. So just want to make a point. We wouldn't call it a C flat, okay? We are simply flattening the note. So we look at our chromatic scale and we see that if we take a C, if we're on a C sharp, we can even look on our piano, and we flatten it, that means we go backward by half a step. We land on a natural note, we land on a C. Same thing happens on our ukulele fretboard. From a C sharp, we flatten it to a C. All right, and then we're just going to build out. We know what an A major looks like. Looks like that, and we'll do the math. We know what an A minor looks like. So we just go, okay, I'm pressing on an A here, and for my A major, I'm pressing on a C sharp. And then I've got an A at the very top, because it's an open A string, and I've got an E here, because it's an open E string. And then we're going to do the we're going to do the same thing here. But all we did was we took our third note and we flattened it. So we were pressing on fret 1, but since we flattened it, we now open up that fret, and now we're playing an open string. So that's A major versus A minor. All right, you seem to all be understanding this decently well, as far as I can tell. So your homework is to go ahead and build your own with the E scale, the B flat scale, and the B scale. These are somewhat more obscure. You'll need the E for sure. But just remember, if it's a flat scale, it's got a flat. It's got flats in it. If it's a sharp scale, then it's got sharps in it. So just make sure that you write down the right ones. And then what I want you to do as well is just play over these. We didn't have time to talk about it today, but go ahead and play these right now. See, your C major starts on fret 5. You gotta really notice where the fret starts. You got C major in first position. And then a D minor is 7, 5, 5. And if we go all the way up at that same shape, up 2 frets higher, we've got an E minor. We go go back to this because I think it shows up in the recording. And then when we do our F major, it's the same little stair-stepping shape, but way up here, starting on an F note. And if we take that same shape up 2 frets, we've got a G major. And then we're running out of real estate on our ukulele, so we're going to drop all the way down for our A minor triad. And then we play the weird one, B diminished. And that leads us right back to C. So if I play that all together, you can hear how it's just very harmonious. Or I could even sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Like that. Are you all able to put your fingers on those notes and shapes? And do you notice how some of the shapes are repeating? All the major shapes look alike. All the minor shapes look alike. They're movable shapes that move up and down. Okay. So I will send out these 2 answer sheets, and I will send out the note about exactly what your homework is. Just play over those little triads. You should be able to do that by the end of the week. That would be wonderful. Whether or not you understand why we're doing it, your ear knows that they're beautiful harmonies. And if you can just get those under your fingers, then next week when we talk about them, you're going to have a much easier time just kind of breezing through playing those shapes. And they are very, very helpful for future learning and future creation. Teaching you how to fish, right? I want you to create your own stuff. That's the whole point here. Robin.
Why is that one a diminished? The B diminished?
Well, we'll talk more about that next week. Because if it was a major or a minor, then it would have a sharp in it. And we know that in the C scale, there's no sharps. So in that particular page where I'm showing you those, every single note that's comprised, that all of those chords make up, all of those notes stay within the key signature that we're working in, which means there's no sharps or flats. If you play a B major, you've got a D sharp in it, and it's not allowed, so we have to pull that back. It's also got an F sharp in it. It doesn't work. We'll talk more about that. Just think of the 7. That's the 7th note. That's T. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I think of T as kind of like the alien of the group. And actually, we call those a chord family. And I've made these little jam cards that I'm about to do another printing of. And I was showing them to Daniel Ho. And Daniel said, you know what, I don't even put the 7 on there because you almost never play it. So he's like, I just consider the first 6 chords to be the family. And I went, oh, well, that would take a lot of explaining about number 7 out, because number 7 is just like weird, the black sheep of the family. You got to kind of spend time talking about it when you hardly ever use it, because it's a really unique sound. It's sort of like the boo 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 in a dream sequence or something, you know. But the other ones make a lot of sense. It's major, minor. And your ear totally understands that right away as soon as I play it. So what we're doing now is just allowing your mind to understand why. Why does it make sense?